What's going on, guys? Put an assortment of knives on the table. I just want to talk for a little bit. This might be more based for the people who are new to the knife hobby. I know when I first got into the knife hobby, I had no idea that there was a knife hobby, you know? And if you ever think about it, well, of course there could be. But there's give and take, much like with everything in life. There's always a plus and a minus. So when I was making the video and trying to think about how I was going to make the video on this beautiful Rockstead shin, and I got to talking about the blade hardness and how if you get the blade so hard and then, you know, so thin at the edge, how you can get that sharpness, it can chip if abused. Now this knife in the proper setting, not being abused, okay, not trying to replicate what they do, especially being that this was hardened up to 67, almost 68 on the Rockwell hardness scale, and then it's super thin. Yep, it's going to be a beautiful cutting tool, but the moment you start doing hard impacts, and any kind of impact where you might twist a little bit, you know, where you're hacking at something, you come down like that, or you bite into the wood and then it twists a little bit, yeah, you can have an edge problem. But that got me to thinking that would make a great video, especially for people who might be new or might not even understand how there's a hobby. And I'm not talking about the collection side of things, whether you're collecting custom knives, okay, something that's a one-off piece, something that's very unique. There's only one like it in the world. If there's a little bit of an imperfection, I'm not saying I could find one on Ray Laconical's knife. Laconical. But, you know, sometimes handmade knives have little inconsistencies around the edge bevel or something where you can see where it was hand done. You know, I'm not saying this knife does again. But I'm talking about just the knife hobby in general. I'm not talking about the rarity of collecting one-off pieces. I'm not talking about collecting even limited run knives like this 204 piece sprint run. I'm talking about the knife hobby as a tool that cuts things. You know, there's so much to think about when you're talking about selecting your knife. A give and take. Again, much like everything in life, there's always a compromise. If you want a thick blade, you can beat on it, okay? You can do some light to medium prying with it as long as the pivot's thick. There's a lot of these overbuilt knives. Overbuilt! Shout out to Rob. I love using that. A lot of these hard-to-use knives that come with thicker stock, that leave it thick so that you could do some prying with it, something that's tough, a tougher locking system. You know, there's all kinds of things when you could have a hobby just in collecting locks. But if you're looking for the very best, in my opinion, the triad lock for strength. Again, just my opinion. But I'm talking about the knife hobby as a tool that cuts stuff. You can beat on this blade, but in reality, whether people want to admit it or not, what's going to cut better? This thin, full flat ground blade? Probably. What would cut better than that even? Well, I don't know. Maybe a slip joint. Well, this has got pretty thick stock here. Did I bring down? No, I didn't. Shame on me. My open L. That's actually right behind me. Okay, something that's very thin, something that's thin and full flat ground. This is going to cut better. An open L. If you watched my sharpening video I just put up a few weeks ago, maybe now, a couple weeks ago, you'll see that open L. Just really thin blade and a great cutter, you know. It depends on what you want in your knife. I don't know what I'm going to title this knife. Maybe just a series of compromise, give and take, or how to maybe start selecting the knife you want to buy and to EDC. You know, you really have to fill out a checklist of stuff that you want. Do you want edge holding? Because if you get something with S110V, again, you're in the knife hobby, you could go and just be a steel junkie. You could collect all different kinds of steels. S110V, 1095. This is O1 tool steel, 154 cm. This is ZDP 189. This is S35VN, AUS 8, 20CV. And again, in your steel selection, there's a bunch of compromises. Something like S110V is going to have larger carbide chunks in it than something like 1095, right? What about something like CTS XHP? That's half the hobby for me personally. I really enjoy this side of things. Of course, I love looks, and I love rarity, and I love tinkering and customizing knives to make them mine or make them yours. You know, if you guys are sending your knives to me. But I really geek out on this portion. The maybe not so much sharpening portion and collecting stones, but I like performance. That's one reason why I just really bonded with this knife immediately, was this ZDP Delica. And I don't mean to keep showing this in the video. Believe me, I know there's tons of guys out there who are like, we get it already. We get it. But think about it. I did round that spine. Had to. Didn't have to, but come on, why wouldn't you? Very thin stock. ZDP 189, hardened. I think Spyderco goes around 61. I've reprofiled it. It's got a pretty thin edge on it. Just a great slicer EDC, you know. So I really dig carrying a knife that packs a bunch of performance, cutting power, especially you pack it down into a... Anyway, I'm not trying to sell you on the Delica, whatever. I know there's a ton of people who don't like it. And that's one of the reasons I always go to my SNG, because my personal uses sometimes do require some light prying. Probably a lot like a lot of you guys who, if you work with your hands for a living and you're outside and you just find yourself in settings that are not office settings, there's a real good chance that you need some light to medium prying on your job. Right? You're a blue-collar guy. So I really got drawn to this. I think the SNG, as I've said a ton of times, with a lot of other knives too, this is not just particular to the SNG, is a great compromise between a thick, tough knife that still cuts very well due to that full flat grind. Top it off with the warranty, blah, 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 you guys know. And I think when you put a nice, thinner, reprofiled edge on these guys, they do cut very well for what they are, a hard-use knife. Does it make a lot of sense? You know, it depends on you. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but does it make a lot of sense to have a thicker, overbuilt, styled, thick blade and then put a real thin edge profile on it? You know? And that way you might have to be a little careful if you're cutting and you twist in your cut. Or say you got to hack something down. Or say you got to pry something and that edge twists up into what you're prying in. You can chip it out. But to me personally, I've found that I can carry this edge profile really well and not do any damage to the blade. So I like to keep bringing that angle back. Of course, there's a point where you'll say, hey, I don't want to bring this back anymore. You know, it doesn't even look good. It doesn't really make sense. But you can see I've reprofiled this thing down a lot. You know, and I think with modern steels, you see how laid back I've got that. With modern steels, that's what you're paying for. I think a lot of people are getting some of these super steels. This is Duratec 20CV. And they're not using them to their full capacity. It doesn't make sense to have an S90V blade or S110V blade that is extremely durable, okay, and then have it with a 20-degree edge on it. I think you should pull that sucker back to 15 degrees, maybe 6, you know, maybe 12 if you're feeling real adventurous, and get the most out of that steel. That's what you're paying for. When they claim toughness and hardness, you should be able to reprofile that thing really thin and it will still be very stable at that thin part of the edge. So it should be sharp and thin. So that's what I geek out on. But again, there is that compromise there. What edge angle do I want? A thicker edge angle is going to be a little bit stronger if you're using it for hard use. If you're twisting and prying, or you're cutting thicker things. Maybe you're cutting big boxes down that could run into a staple. How I've got this thing reprofiled way down here, you know, if I hit a staple, I think I'm going to be all right, because this Grayman Duo is a very thick blade stock. Not too thick. I don't own any knives that I think are ridiculously thick. There's a few that get super thick, but you know, you got to see what you want. That could be a video in and of itself. Really could. I could talk for 20 minutes on my recommended edge angles. And let me know if you want that video for different steels. I've been doing this. I don't mean to keep tooting my own horn. Believe me. Believe me. But I just have a lot of experience carrying and using a lot of different steels over the past 10 years or so. You know, I haven't really been keeping up to date with the newest, like the 10V steels and some of the real crazy SM100. What's that? Some of the real exotic ones. You know, so I can't say for everything, but what I do know is I'd be glad to share with the stuff that I do have experience with. But you just have to decide, how well do you want your cutting ability? You know, a real thick blade is not going to cut as good as a thin blade. It's all kind of obvious, but I do think it's all a series of compromises, and some knives hit that better than others. Okay, I think that's one of the reasons that the Sebenza, this is a 25. Let's get a look at a 21. Do I have a 21 here? Oh, I know I've got a... We're looking right at it, right in the center. If it had been a snake, it would have bit me. I got a couple of these laying around. This is not my Sebenza here, but I've got a couple laying around to show you. I think that's one of the reasons why Chris Reeve has been so incredibly popular over the years. In my opinion, this knife design, it is very classic and elegant looking. This knife 10 years from now, in my opinion, will still be in style. There's no wild anything about this knife. There's nothing that would date this knife and put it into, like, gosh, see, I'm a car guy, but do you guys remember when custom cars in the mid-90s would have those neon graphics, and then they would have like the torn checkered flag, the finish line flag, and then like spackled, and then, you know, maybe in the early 2005, the realistic flames. Do you remember like the trucks that you would see going down the road, and it had the realistic looking flames airbrushed on the front of it? You know, there's nothing here that dates this. So I think it's really cool to have a design that's just so classic. Trying to get this to focus for you guys. Something that has all the details taken care of. All the chamfers are perfect all the way around. You know, but anyways, series of compromises. He's not going to be the latest and greatest on the market. Not many people, well, they actually have, because he's been so incredibly consistent. But if this knife was released today and next to a ZT, you know, most people say, wow, this knife here has so much more attitude than the Sebenza, just in design. You can see these lines, how this swoops forward, this swedge that comes down. You know, again, a series of compromises. This knife, although I don't see how, and I do absolutely love the ZT450 with the bearings in it, you know, with the flipper. Could it be dated with the oversized pivot up front? Could it date itself? Could we say, yeah, that's so 2015? In 15 years from now, I am very curious to know if this will still be talked about like it is today. Maybe it will be. Maybe this will be our Buck 110. Maybe the Paramilitary 2 will be our generation's Buck 110. Where we say, wow, that design still works today, you know? I don't know, a little bit of a tangent, but I really like the compromise that Chris Reeve has made, all the way down to he has switched to S35 VN, you know, and he's got a lot riding on that. He owns Chris Reeve knives. He helped develop S30V and helped develop S35VN. And I even talked with, gosh, I'm going to forget his name, but Paul Boss. Who's the other? There's another Paul. Anyways, oh man, I wish I wouldn't have forgot his name. Anyways, we talked for about an hour just on heat treat, and Chris Reeve had kind of come up, and originally they were hardening their S30V a little bit too hard, and Chris Reeve was getting knives back that had chips in it. So he backed off the hardness a little bit. Again, that was a compromise he wanted to make. You know, that's one of the complaints you hear about for knife guys who are, I wouldn't even say steel snobs, but just looking for more performance, you know, and edge holding. I hate to use the word performance, because what do you mean performance? If this blade is a little bit softer, then that means it's going to sharpen a little bit easier, okay? So I don't mean to bash on the Sebenza. I'm trying to talk really good, saying that this is a great compromise of everything. Very classic lines. You can hold it in any grip. I believe that this profile would go equally at home, whether you're hiking in the woods or whether you have a class reunion, whether you have a business meeting and this is in your pants, you know, or you're carrying this knife. It's great. I think he's really onto something, and thousands of other people do as well. You know, I think he's got a good compromise here. You can easily sharpen it, and you can even service it the way he's got such incredible precision here. Just a series of compromises. You got to think about what you want. Do you want something that you can pry with? Do you want something that you can cut with? Again, in the knife hobby, you have to think too. Looks certainly come into play. Come on, why wouldn't they? That's why most of us are here. There was a knife that looked awesome, and then you got hooked, and now you're maybe have moved on and you're looking for performance and stuff. I'm gonna have to pick up one of these Lawmans in the CTS XHP. Again, this is a kind of a cool compromise to me, because I really like that strong lock. I think the feel is great in hand. Very stout knife. I like that they don't have any steel liners in here. It's all G10, making this knife really light. I like how thin the hollow grind is. This is incredibly thin. Can you see that? It is insane. The cutting performance on this is ridiculous. It is. Whether you like cold steel, whether you like Lynn Thompson or not. Yet the coating on this AUS 8 sucks. It does. But with the new one with the DLC coating on it, with the upgraded blade steel, you know, incredible. And again, I had some complaints on my cold steel video that I make. Yeah, that's great they upgraded, but now I'm not going to be able to sharpen it as easy as I did the AUS 8. The price went up a little bit, you know, and they would rather have the AUS 8 versions. And to some point, from a guy who just needs a knife to put in their pocket, carry and use, and don't want to get caught up in this knife hobby that we all have, I can understand it. You know, I can understand why you would want the AUS 8 version. Doesn't mean I would want it over the CTS XHP. But again, that's the compromise that they want to make. They want a very easy to do maintenance on, easy to sharpen knife that doesn't cost what they might consider an arm and a leg. To some people, a $30 knife, which I don't think this was much more than 30 bucks secondhand. Well, not secondhand. I got it off eBay originally. I think it might have been 35, maybe $45. I can't remember. To $100, which I think these are in CTS XHP. They're around there. Is twice the price. And to them, if you're not real educated, it looks like the same exact knife. So I can 100% understand it. And this knife isn't a bad knife. Not even the AUS 8. They do it really well. And it does sharpen very easy. Can you hear, when I twing my straight razor, it has this same sound. You just hear how sharp that is. It's amazing. AUS 8, especially from cold steel, can get really sharp. Still a great knife. But it just depends on what you're looking for. Again, this video is more focused for people who are new to knives. If you guys want dedicated, maybe steel reviews, or just my opinions on certain knife steels, I'd be glad to do that. You know, maybe some sort of top 5 starter knives or top 5 knives under maybe $50 to get started out. I could do that. I think I've got enough of the lower cost knives here that are still incredible values. You know, GEC would definitely make some of those lists. It just depends on what you want. Let me know if you like this style of video. This is more of a rambling video. I have some notes here, but I didn't even look at them. I didn't. I think we covered most of them, though. Talking about your edge bevel. Why would you want a thinner edge angle versus a thicker one? We talked about steel choice. I'm looking at my notes here. We talked about hardness. Okay, when you get to talking about this Rockstead Shin at 67.8 hardness, you know, it's a compromise. Some people might honestly, really, and I'm not pulling your leg, some people might want this AUS 8 steel if they were the same exact price and you offered them this knife or this knife, but you had to carry it the rest of your life. I promise you for a fact, I know that there are some people that would rather have this AUS 8 blade versus this ZDP blade. You know, it is a compromise. So I think it's neat. I think there is a wonderful hobby just in the performance, you know, in putting all these great combinations together, whether you're talking about a compression lock versus a frame lock versus a triad lock versus no lock versus a well done liner lock versus a standard back lock or mid lock, whatever you'd like to call that, you know, versus the ball lock. Some people would rather have this knife than a lot of other knives. It is extremely light. It depends on what you want. With that extremely lightweight, you're going to get a little bit of flex. You're going to. This is even a reinforced polymer. This is not their standard FRN. Somebody did correct me on that, and they were right. This is not your standard FRN. But even with these ribs that enforce this handle, it does still have that flex. But again, the compromise that Spyderco was willing to make, this is more of a slicer knife. We're not calling this a heavy-duty knife. It does have a heavy-duty rated lock, but they're not calling it, you know, a military style, stick this in 2 rocks and use this as a step to get up and over the fence. They're not claiming this knife is that. So there are some people that say, hey, and I was one of those guys that say, maybe not this knife for the rest of my life, but I said, hey, what a wonderful platform to put your S110V in and put it in a slicer configuration and then pair it up with a nice light duty handle that I can go out, and I have dropped this on the concrete. Can you see that? And I can go out and beat up, and for less than $100, or I think, not less, I think it was like $125, I can have this wonderful unicorn of a steel and try it and just test it out and cut with it and use it, and then pair it up with this beautiful wire clip. You know, not a looker. I don't think this knife is the best looking knife in my collection. I think it looks cool in a way that Spyderco's look cool. They look cool as in performance based. You know, to me, I thought the hole was the ugliest thing I'd ever seen on a knife. And again, just going off on a tangent, I enjoy myself when I make these kind of videos here. But I thought that hole, man, was that ugly. But once you understand the performance and how everything fits in your hand and you just carry and use a Spyderco knife for a week, it all makes sense and somehow it looks beautiful to you. At least it did in my opinion. I'm kind of weird that way. I've probably told this story before, but when we first got our minivan, we were looking for minivans. If you were to take me 10 years ago, we had kids, but if you were to take me 15 years ago, back when I was riding around in a 2000 Pontiac, Firebird with 20-inch wheels on it. And, you know, brand new. Brand new. We put the 20-inch wheels on it, and we were rolling that sucker hard. My wife and I. I would have never thought that I would have liked a minivan. But to me, when you have kids and you see how beautiful the minivan works in your life and the performance of it, it somehow makes it attractive. I feel the same way about Spyderco knives. Like, I like the way our Town and Country minivan looks. It's a white freaking limo and it works perfect for our kids. I feel the same way about the Spyderco knife. You know, it's a great way to deploy your knife. The way that this is round and slides around the thumb all the way around, unlike maybe a Strider. Strider does pretty good because it has that rounded bit in the back and it transitions out to that flat. But there are some with weird shape openings. I don't have any here, but anyways, in the same way that Spyderco said, hey, let's just make that compromise. I believe they used to say they design in the dark. So they make it make sense for your hands and as a tool. And then if it looks good, hey, that's a plus. But, you know, originally their designs were for performance first. And I still say they follow that, but, you know, they have been going for looks lately. Not all of their designs, but to me this is an incredible looking knife, whether you like spider holes or not. You know, this knife works. But again, it is all about performance. This knife is one of the very best Spydercos for EDC, in my opinion, right now on the market. I would put it up in my top 3 favorite Spydercos of all time. And I'm talking looks and performance. It's the total package. It's not cheap. You're going to pay for that. But it's an incredible knife. And it's on washers, which I really like. So everything fits right here. I've already done a review on this. It's going on almost 30 minutes. Guys, I appreciate you hanging out. I am willing to run my mouth some more like this. If you guys want to give me a topic, I will probably give you more than you want in a video. I don't know who made it to the end. Hey, let's try something fun. Let's do a code word to see if you got to the end of the video. Let's see. What could we make the code word without being too corny and too obvious? Let's say sharp. Let's just say sharp. Please put somewhere in the comment below the word sharp, and I will know that you made it almost to 30 minutes of the video. That'll be a little fun game. Be more of a, I guess, metric to see who got to the end of the video, to see if I wasted my time. My time's very precious. I love spending it and making these videos like this. I love the fact that it goes uploaded to YouTube permanently. So if I spend 30 minutes making this video, at any time, 10 years from now even, somebody can hop in and watch this video. To me, that's why YouTube is so extra special. You know, you're not making a post on Facebook and it just disappears after everybody gets through their feed. You know, it's something that's there permanently. It's educational, hopefully a little bit entertaining, hopefully a little bit educational. But please leave the word sharp in your comments somewhere. And I'm not trying to be corny. I just want to know if I'm wasting my time. I think there's plenty of people that will get through all the way. There you go. Let me know what your EDC is in your pocket. What has your compromise been? Because this knife hobby is like a journey. Really, finding your EDC is a journey. And I know if you're anything like I am, you, after 5, 6 years, maybe even a year, you will pick out your favorites. And no matter what knife you get, no matter what the new kid is in the family, you will always go back to that old pair of jeans. You know, mine personally has been this. Lately, it's been this. I go to my Hinderer. I go to an SNG of some sort. Again, this is the smaller Hinderer. And there's a few more. But if I had to pick a few that I always go back to, it'd be tough. That's for another video. This is 30 minutes long. Thanks a lot, guys. See ya.